Hi, I'm Christina Petersen, and I'm happy you are here to the Conmoto podcast. And it's interview series of Feldenkrais practitioner to Feldenkrais practitioner, because I'm a very interested person in Feldenkrais and also Feldenkrais practitioner. And my guest today, Stacy, is too a Feldenkrais practitioner. So I think for everyone now is clear it's about the Feldenkrais method. And now I give over to Stacy. And Stacy, can you tell a little bit about yourself? Where are you and what you are doing?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Our prior conversation together was how passionate we are about sharing the field of Feldenkrais and to bring it out so people have a little bit more understanding, because they probably would like to have a better feeling for what they are learning sometimes, especially as practitioners. My background is in movement because I came into it as a physical therapist. So fortunately for me, it's been a fabulous career path. And the Feldenkrais method was really the incredible inspiration to how to build the learning in my clients. I have found it to be just as even more impressive the years as I continue to evolve it. And I've kind of studied some other things. I'm a Pilates certified teacher, and I developed some things to try and help people just to find what these Feldenkrais ideas are about, to self-learn and take care of themselves.
Oh, something you said caught me, that you say the learning about themselves. Your patients, they come, you're a physical therapist, but you have not only the idea to do a therapy for them, but you want to build up something in them. And to understand more deeper why I'm so attracted to this, we maybe go to the beginning of your Feldenkrais career. And do you remember when you heard the first time about the Feldenkrais method or the word Feldenkrais?
Yes, I would love to give a shout out as well at the same time. I had an opportunity to contract as a physical therapist with who was a former adjunct professor of mine, Beth Rubenstein, who was studying the Feldenkrais method at the time. And her background was in neurobiology. So I knew she had some chops. I knew she knew something. So when I came to work with her, I had this opportunity to be mentored in an understanding of what this work really was about. She also was very connected to a lot of people like Larry Goldfarb and just multiple people in the community. So she brought them in. So we had just this rich space to build and understand. And this was in the 80s. So really neuroscience hadn't really been the discussion of what it was that we were finding out about this whole self-image and body awareness. So that really solved a big missing piece of my physical therapy practice, was how do you help people embrace their self-connection? How do they notice themselves? And we do notice ourselves, but our negative self-talk and our cultural influences of trying to be the right this or the right that just runs such interference. So it was really great to have that exposure. But I also was challenged because it was so counterintuitive to me. I grew up with athletics. So to me, if you're going to achieve something, you work harder and you push and so forth. So to generate something, now we understand less effort and how micro movements have a very neurologic influence in the way we operate. But for then, it was extremely difficult. So I didn't really just jump into a training. The training came to me. It was the one and only Los Angeles training. And I was so lucky that Mark Reese and Donna Ray Reese at the time, they knew how to talk to people that had backgrounds in science as physical therapists. So I kept going to workshop after workshop, and then the local practitioner that was really a mentor for me was Ralph Strauch. And Ralph was, finally saying, "Stacy, what are you waiting for?" And even then I said, well, you know what, I'll sign up for 10 days, but I'm still not sure. So when I started the training, it was within 48 hours, I thought I will hawk my house if I have to do that to pay for this training, because it clearly was something that I needed to know, but I didn't know how I was going to know it. And so the training, I was a capable mover. So truthfully, I kept thinking it was all about movement. I can do this and I can do that. It took me a very long time and still time to mature in the process, to understand that the movement is the vehicle to really empower us to understand how do we learn and how do we build on finding these ways of finding resilience in an ever-changing world. So that's a long answer to the Feldenkrais question, but that's how I came to it. And then I became a zealot, how you come out of something and then you just because you want to share it with everybody. I still have a lot of that in me, but I was fortunate that I had a background with the Arthritis Foundation. And I remember giving a talk in a symposia for people with fibromyalgia. And I had a large room, probably over 100 people that were wanting to learn more about how to take care of themselves. And I did a mini ATM, awareness through movement lesson, and watched them all develop some comfort. And I thought, I'm not just making this up. This needs to get into the science realm. So then I reached out to, I was, the Mount St. Mary's Physical Therapy graduate program reached out to me to say, we'd like you to be involved in a research project. And I thought, well, I'll get involved if you research what I want to research. I said, I want to look at people that have persistent pain, and I want to look at awareness through movement. So I was so lucky that I was given some very top students that had a lot of mentoring of research, because that's not my background. And we studied the effects, and those are the lessons that you'll see that are called moving out of pain, that Mark Rees made eventually for Feldenkrais practitioners. So not only did I get to be in part of that process, spread the word a little bit more, but I also got the opportunity to watch Mark Rees, who was probably one of the top people that had such choreography of awareness for movement lessons. And he had always planned to put together a series that could be working with pain. And I would literally drive to San Diego for a couple hours and get there, get on the floor, be that person that he was processing the lesson, take the recording, go back to do the research, come back again. And we were doing this back and forth for a few months. So the process really gave me an opportunity to see the challenges of research, but also to see that this had merit. It affected people in a way that I knew people that were having to have pain as an issue in their life, that they could have something valuable like awareness through movement or the Feldenkrais method.
Wow, very interesting. And it's overwhelming for me that you are talking so much about research, that it is possible to dive into the work and to find out something what can be maybe measured or used, or that you have something, because it's what I know, it's to do the Feldenkrais work, it's a little bit slippery maybe to do research. So I have a friend here, she's a professor for music, and she also did her PhD, and she wanted to see how is the influence about the music improvisation and the Feldenkrais method when they do Feldenkrais lessons. And it's so interesting, and we have often a talk about how can you do this, that you can do this and to bring it more to a clearer point, and also maybe to have more ideas how can this be integrated in certain layers of our of the humankind, or the layer of all the the human beings. Maybe this I was thinking about, that's nice that you are so close to it. And I'm very astonished that it sounds for me that your start in the Feldenkrais method was the research, and to see how this works with other people, and that you found, oh, that's maybe good for other people, and how can I use it?
Mhm.
And
Well, let me be clear. The skill sets that I have are to know a lot of smart people, to hang out with people that know research, that know how to find the right Feldenkrais lessons, how to, that was the luxury of riding along and having somebody like Beth who introduced me to a method and had the patience to work with me, because I had a box that I was staying inside of, and I had to find a way to really address something that just really was pretty locked into my habitual thinking. But also, it was a flawed research. It didn't have very many participants. It didn't get published. We had hoped it would. I was able to present it at a California chapter for what's called the APTA, the American Physical Therapy Association. And in my mind, it was an approximation. I like that language with Feldenkrais, that, that we're working along, and everybody that, has gone forward in doing research. I love the idea that we have this evolution of looking at these ideas and then studying it, because we do need the rigor of looking at it from that perspective. But I also know from personal experience how much it has affected my clients, and how much I know that they're empowered, that they can take care of themselves. That's a huge part. And I love that. That's, I'm a big, I think giving people hope and giving people the concept that there's something that they can do for themselves is a huge gift.
yeah, I think you mentioned that it was in the 80s. And when we think in the Feldenkrais method, time on Earth with the Feldenkrais method, it's a very young method. And so it's clear that the research is starting, or it's beginning with little people, but that there is a movement to do this, or that I think in each lesson I give, I just gave an FI before and also yesterday. Also FI is one person to the other person by touching and talking with each other about movement, but without words.
Mhm.
And this is so amazing. I do every time a research with this person together.
Mhm.
And that's so nice that you had the luck to work with so many people in this thinking, in this way. But I'm asking myself, did you find out something about yourself or your movement? So you were where you did the sport and you said there was nothing, but what was your process in the Feldenkrais world? What did you discover for you in your process?
Oh, thank you for bringing that back to that, because yeah, there's some very strong personal things. One of the things that I draw on a lot is we would, gather around and we'd observe a practitioner working with a client, and we would be very kind of looking at the very, just taking it in. And I remember a colleague leaning over to me and goes, you stopped doing that thing with your jaw. And I looked at her and I thought, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I noticed that you always, when you were looking, you always were, I obviously was clenching my jaw. And I said, first of all, I love that conversation, because to me, I didn't know I had the habit. I didn't go after changing the habit, and it went away. And I use that a lot for people to realize your self-improvement will not be just the local area. This thing is going to build out into all the recesses of what you need for yourself. And that's something I bring about to people all the time is, first of all, I just mentioned that. And obviously I'm not a perfect mover. So there's a lot of places. I remember at one time there was this aha moment, and I remember jumping off the floor, running over to my notebook, making a note like, wow, that was a huge blind spot for me. And then I realized, I wonder how many teachers prior to that had worked with me to give me that moment that I discovered it for myself. And I love that, because I think that's the other thing is we do know if we own it, then we can replicate it. Then it's not something I don't have to think that I need that person to show me this. Or, when people come in and go, well, so and so told me that my right shoulder is always up. And I said, well, what do you feel? And then they have no sense of reference of why or how they can get to that understanding themselves. So that's a lot of times where we begin and that comes from my personal experience of realizing, I need to give them, a sense of where they start so they can go from where they go, and then help them notice the other things that come along, because improvement is a lot more difficult to validate than having something happen that's negative. We know that. So that a lot of what we do is help people illuminate that this is happening, but feel it. This is not a cheerleading session, and I'm real upfront to say that backfires if I don't tell you the truth. So it's like, you found it, it's yours.
Yes, it is. And sometimes I think when, especially in the hands-on work, that maybe the people come, they lie down, we talk only with the hands, and there will happen something, and they stand up, they go out. And they say, oh, that was nice, and they will maybe find some improvement. But this illuminating, so to build up the environment for improvement or for knowing themselves better, and to replicate it again, the situation. So you need to have the story at the beginning. How is your shoulder moving? And today it was this situation. It was new for her. She was a sport teacher, and she knows very well about her movements. But it was like, oh, this is easy to look to my left. So the movement to the left. But oh, this is really not so easy for me to look to the right shoulder. And it was for her, then she was hooked, that she found something what she didn't know about her.
Yes.
And then we can build up from there an ideas. So she came with some other things, but we found something what hooked her attention beside her, I will say, her problem, which was obvious, but for her. But this was new, and she was interested in herself. And from there we could start, and we could see what is at the end. The movement was different. Of course, was more available for her. She could look to the right and to the left, and everything was easier. And beside her problem was also less in the foreground.
Right.
And she sometimes, I think that's the thing why it's so good working. We have the story at the beginning, and we look how it changes at the end. That everything makes sense. It's not only a nice touching.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And we are at a challenge that people want things fast, and it's process driven, and that we need to help them through that concept, because anything with really a value that you learn takes time. We were talking earlier about language acquisition and changing languages, and you would never expect to be fluent in another language, but being fluent in movement is really something that we just assume is we can just drop into, or we're just thrown off like, how could I have done that? And it blew, how many times do we hear people come in going, I really did something stupid? Well, I don't think that was intentional. So how could it be stupid? And most times they put themselves in a situation that's life, and guess what? It's not pleasant, but generally it's a time to learn, and so you get better and better of having less of those situations that you're caught off, having to have more recovery time or having more guidance of how to navigate that. But it really is, very philosophical for a lot of us to talk about it and to put it in a language that is really tangible, because who wouldn't want, a quick fix? Who wants, but I also often tell people, would you ever come in here to work on this, or that? No, you'd never make the time for that. So this, injuries are gifts, as I've been told. That's a nice thing, reference in the martial arts, that those are opportunities that we can work through that. But these are the bonuses that you get out of it, that you are going to be better off. And I love telling people that. And that I believe is true. Most times they're better off, that they get to process and take the time to nourish themselves in movement-based learning. So, yeah.
And how was your process with the hands-on work with yourself? So when we go to through a training, and we will have all these lessons, not only the group lessons where we lie on the floor or standing and making movements experiences, but how was this in the conversation with someone? Did you like it at the beginning, or how was your approach to the hands-on work?
Well, I already had the license to touch, so people were pretty familiar with that. And I think the conversation had, if I understand the question, I think people had to learn that I wasn't here to hurt them first to make it better. So I always could come back and say, listen, I'd hurt you if I thought it would help. So just let's get that for the record straight. So, and then I quickly explained to them, you really have more to learn when you don't feel the pain. And so those are the main things, because the touch is very different. And I tried to put together a course through the doctoral program that I did later on. And that was to teach physical therapists how to have the listening touch that we get as Feldenkrais practitioners. Our intention is so different. Our intention as physical therapists are that this is wrong and therefore I'll fix this. And that I had to unlearn. I was pretty heavy-handed, but I had the blessing to do a lot of lessons after my graduation with Eileen Bakirita. And all I can say, as a parallel in the musical world, it was like I was a Steinway under her hands. There was so little of her touch and contact, but her intention was so clear. So I was able to evolve that quickly. I know people knew there's a substantive difference in the way I touched. And I don't take credit for that. I take credit for the access of how I got to learn that. And that I explained that what they're getting is an opportunity for me to really listen through my hands. And if I'm heavy-handed with you, I will dull my sense of listening. So that's always been a fun way to work with it, but it comes up often because they go somewhere else and they're told something different. And so we have to kind of roll back and go through it again. And eventually I have lifelong clients that check in with me, and I love that they trust it. They know I won't hurt them, or if it does, it's rare. And that there is a wisdom that we share in ourselves, that all I'm helping them do is tapping into that. I'm not something that and I love what Deborah Bose says. When they walk through the door, she says, I'm not here to fix you. And I try and give that disclaimer too. I say, you have some structural problems there, but why don't we use that to be informed that that's an area that you want to be a little bit more smooth with your movement, so that you don't keep putting that onto them. But I'll always say, there's a lot of real estate here. We can go into some other areas and and I use metaphors a lot, probably too much, but I'll just always say, it's like, those relatives that just come in and they don't clean up the kitchen when they leave. It's like, let's put them to work, right? So let's get the balance of the body to do more of its use its whole self better.
Yeah. I like to hear what you explain, and it was not so much at the beginning what I thought I asked you, but it's maybe not your fault. We can't say fault, but I truly think it was me who wasn't so clear. I thought I directly asked you about what process you went through when you got in hands-on work. But that you told us about what happened after the training, but during the training. So I asked this a little bit more deeper because for me, it was, I'm not a physiotherapist. I came out from the music world. So I wasn't used that someone beside my family or a doctor will touch me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had one FI before. This is functional integration, the hands-on work before, but I slept there. So
Mm.
I didn't know so much about it when I went into the training. And then I had a lovely FI, but I still was a little bit, how to say, shy with this.
Mm.
It was something, it was so, because the touch is so nice and
Mm.
so listening, it
Mhm.
was a little bit tickling for me to do this. But now I love it. And I like to give the work, the hands-on work, maybe more than the group lessons. But at my start, I was more, oh, I will only work with words and they lie down and we will have the experience. And it changed during the whole process more to the hands-on work,
Mm.
maybe. I like the both
Mhm.
things we can do. So I ask you, how was it for you?
Mm.
What was your idea at the beginning? Oh, the group lessons or more the personal lessons?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I have to really think far back. That was a while ago. But I'd say it's interesting because hearing how you describe your experience, I don't know if I even thought about it, at least for a while. But one thing for sure is I never was one to have massage or to seek that out. I was a active little kid. I would work it out by running around or swimming or whatever. So to me, it just wasn't a modality that I learned about it. Certainly, appreciate all the benefits of it. But when I started being touched by practitioners, I had an immediate response that this is, I had to step out to not think it was mystical or magical because it wasn't. It was something very clear that I was going to come out smarter in the process of this experience. And that's what I would tell people. And whenever I have clients, and I have a lot of clients that travel, I said, I'm going to find you a practitioner where you go because you can benefit from multiple teachers because the training is like this. And so and we spend so much time of evolving our personal self that when we go to touch somebody, it's a process of the duality of us together. It's not me versus them or them versus me. So that was that. And I remember the very first time, the very first Feldenkrais lesson where somebody lifted my head and it felt like it was being levitated. I had no sense of his hands, no sense of anything going on. And as a result, I felt this incredible relationship to all the parts of me or many parts of me. And that was just really an astonishing concept, that, and now when I look back, I realize how powerful that is for somebody to have that experience and to know that that is something very informative to the movement system, that it doesn't have to look at itself from a pathos or pathology, or it doesn't have to come in, well, of course my right arm's like that. This came in from a qualitative way of touch that gave me an idea to notice my whole self. So those things were really powerful. I also found out I was pregnant in the very first trimester, the first trimester and the first segment in the training. So I, for a long time, wasn't sure what was going on, if it was the pregnancy, if it was the training. And I mentioned that because what a gift to go through this process. And I knew that I was caring for this evolving person as well. And they got to be included in the training from utero on forward postnatally. So so there was a lot going on with that, but it's, yeah, in fact, I still have access to the audio recordings and I can still hear my 30-year-old son babbling in the background. And I just can't imagine now, what was going on with the organism of all of us with that whole process. So, yeah. So did I answer it that time?
Yes, yes, of course. Also the other was perfect. I like what is coming out in these conversations, and you're also bringing me back to my training. Also, I was pregnant, but it was the first segment and I was in the last 3 semester. In the second segment, I gave birth to the 3rd child, and also he was part of the training later. He was there and we looked how was his he came with me, and the whole family sometimes were with me, and he was there. And funny enough, there was a segment I was learning again to come on all fours for the walking on knees and hands. And he too was in this time. It was so funny, and we saw him, and maybe this is also something we can talk about, that a lot of Feldenkrais lessons, especially the group lessons, are so based in our development, and that we do some structures we did when we were 3 months or 4 months or for hours. The first gaze to a light, what is doing, how is the head rolling, because there's a light. You can't see anything, but you want to turn a little bit there, and we are going back to it, but it's not without the help of our brain today, the structured brain, and that we are not thrown in the water without help. We can swim, we are walking, we can do something, but we go back to the time we couldn't walk, and we can redefine something we maybe didn't do when we were young, or we did it the first time, and now we have the possibility to travel back to ourselves, or to look, oh, there it was, we could do this then.
Yeah. Well, the lessons are brilliant. They really are brilliant. They're a synthesis of what you're talking about, early child development. But what's fascinating to me, and I just taught a lesson yesterday, was from the Esalen series, and it was the buttock lesson. And I laughed because I told the group, I said, when was my least favorite one from the Esalen series. And I think it's because I came from such a muscle-centric background that, to me, I didn't want to confuse, but it was so fascinating to me when I went back to just doing these repetitive different types of contractions, different skeletal organizations, and I literally just had more aha movements again. This is 30 years post, this is so long in my evolution of this work to realize that's the beauty, the surprise that comes out of the movement processes that he developed with a background in physics, a background in martial arts, a background in child development understanding, and then his own deep research into neurobiology and so forth. He was a polymath, so he really absorbed multiple languages. There's so many ways that he was a laborer, he was a tutor, so he had been really evolving something that just looks like a simple movement puzzle. It's so not, and he played with them, he tinkered with them, he adjusted them, and I really respect the practitioners that feel comfortable that in the process of doing these lessons, and I teach regularly because it is my way of staying organized in my thinking, in my feeling, in my sensing, in my doing. And so, but then it lets me go off and play with my own handwriting. I probably if you watch me use a Pilates piece of equipment, they would say, well, that's not Pilates, but it's Pilates informed. And I love the idea of these springs. And I get to use that to relate to ground forces, take them out of their habitual, use it in a way that the structure of the equipment has fixed ways. So those are constraints. And then I can play around and help them, because they're going to come at my Pilates teacher wants to do this, or my personal trainer wants to do this. So I figure if I can use that and bring it into my language of how to be within themselves, to know how to care for themselves, so that they can do what they want to do. Took up golf for the same reason, did very little Tai Chi. Edward would know it was, but each thing I was able to process being a newbie, at learning something, and be humbled that I didn't know it. And there is structure to, I wouldn't want to go to a surgeon that doesn't have the structured learning of how to be a surgeon. So there is a place for structured learning. So I want to go into that and see if I can process some of these things. So that's the life experience that I am enjoying about the awareness of movement element of our understanding of this work. We have such creative, there's just such a platform of so many things we can do.
Yeah, interesting. I was right on the way to ask you about your work. What is special with you? So, and I think you developed something with rollers. Can you talk a little bit more, or can you show a little bit what you are doing with this? Because in the talk before, you said something about how you use the roller for, yes, in the Feldenkrais way. How do you do this?
Thank you. That was I kept thinking there's got to be a way I could bring this out to the world, meaning the Feldenkrais method, which I started with the research. And I thought, well, that didn't get enough doors open. Let's keep going. And along the way, I was introduced to foam rollers, like a lot of Feldenkrais practitioners in the method. And we were designed to be explorative and look and feel. And I was watching, and I knew this was back in the 80s, like I said, that foam rollers hadn't existed yet, but gym balls, the big Swiss balls that we use in the world. And I remember when they were laughed at, when they were being introduced to gyms, literally laughed out of the gyms. And so I knew that something simple like a foam roller would take off. So I thought, so I started teaching with it, and then I realized they're doing things that they do with a lot of other things. They're not using the ingenious ideas of using it somatically to play with the environment and see how we adapt to it, not trying to make ourselves formed from the roller, but the roller being a vehicle to be a catalyst to sense what we're feeling in ourselves. So I was advised that, the rollers are already out there. So was there a way I could make it a little, improve it? And I thought, well, I don't know if I can improve it. But I thought, well, wait a minute, in our modern world, being on a 6-inch roller doesn't necessarily open the interstitial spaces of our torso or thorax. And I would see people lying on this, and I knew just the tensegrity, which is the integrity of tension and the structures of the anatomy, that there was going to be closing down, especially in places like the ribs, the basket of ribs. So to me, it just seemed, well, logical that one, using my Feldenkrais senses, that what if I were to modify the shape so that their body would contour in a way that respiration would be, these interstitial spaces would be available. And then I thought, well, but one of the things that's really cool in our work is that we like to contrast and compare. So why don't I keep the other part so that we can compare, get on it this way, get on it that way. It doesn't roll, but I kind of like that process, because it kept people from thinking of it as a massage tool, but instead that we could affect the soft tissues, but let's do it differently. So then took a lot longer than I expected to happen. So I was playing with the prototype. So my research and development phase went on for a long time, even had to change the name. And fortunately, I really liked the SMARTROLLER name, because to me, it was dealing with the intelligence of the body. So I started cutting them up, and then next thing I know, I had a caterpillar roller, and then I had a roller for standing on and playing with. And again, we as Feldenkrais practitioners, we use a half stool to feel a sit bone. We use walls to push. I mean, we are simple in the strategy. The lower tech the higher the process for us. So, and then the company that actually OPTP that ended up marketing it and manufacturing it gave me the ends of the roller as a joke saying, would you like to have some coasters? And I said, well, you know what this looks like? This looks like buttocks. So I figured, okay, well, let's make them into sits. Now we have a smart roller for when you sit. So that's kind of how this whole process came along. And then they came back to me, they said, your products look pretty, but nobody knows how to use them. So I developed a book, a guide that we were able to do a second edition to. And again, in my thinking, they are obviously Feldenkrais inspired awareness through movement vignettes. Mark Reese used to call them 3-minute miracles. We got to capture people. We have to let them get some quick feelings fast or we'll lose them. So that was kind of the genesis of all that. And yeah, I love looking at her. I call her her, and she's got offspring, the links and the sits. And so they're the tools I like to play with. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer about those guys too.
Yeah, but I think it's so nice that each one has his own way to connect with what they know. So normally a Feldenkrais practitioner has another background, like me, the music, you more a physical physiotherapist, and that you bring together everything, but influenced by the idea of the Feldenkrais method. And what I hear is this to contrast and to see it's here like this, and then it's about learning and that they know more about each other. It's and themselves. And so I think it's very good working. I also like to work with rollers, but maybe it's different kind with me because I have another background. One moment. So I like so much that the people are on the back and they stand the legs and put only the foot on the roller, and then we experience the rolling and the fore and the back, and if you build a whole lesson around it, it's so amazing how the people stand up. And especially when you work with one foot, and it's not like only the massage with the hard roller, but feel how is it and this, and then they stand up after doing maybe only one foot, how they stand, and they feel all the difference. And it's so fast because we talked about that you need time in the Feldenkrais process, but sometimes it can be so fast after 50 minutes, one foot on a roller, with the idea of discovering things and feeling and sensing and what can I do and be creative. And this is also a good thing when you're outside. It's not always everywhere plain, and then you can develop the movability of your ankle. And by the way, when you stand, you will feel after this that also your neck and the upper spine is much more movable by these all explorations. And yes, I'm very curious about your work, and I use it a lot for like catching the attention. But I think what I understood is that you also are working with fascia, or you think it's maybe a little bit different than mine?
Well, first of all, the rollers are firm, so they're not hard like the cardboard, but they are firm. And the nice thing is, I think that they give you a lot of easeability of making things happen a little bit differently. It's funny because I've got a client tomorrow, and I realized, you just reminded me. I thought, oh, because I really like, I just did a whole thing on how to feel the ground support in sitting through your feet. And so the feeling of feeling the feet, like probably when you're working with a musical performer, it is just such a profound opportunity. And it's really nice when you can help bring in these spaces in a world that they don't ever make the connection. You know, they think posture is about this one element between the hips on up, and rarely, and I had to really work with the people that were sponsoring this program to say, you know, no, you don't get it. If I get them to feel their legs while they're sitting, that is a game changer for them to have more endurance to be able to sit longer. So we kept the firmness, that in mostly not because we believe in the idea of the soft ones and so forth. And I do believe that we do affect the fascial system by way of the nervous system. So the fascial system is very wired. It's a very strong feedback system. So in my opinion, by respecting the pain, respecting the comfort, we're bypassing this threat. And that's why breaking, the other thing I was going to mention, it's so close to the floor, 6 inches, believe it or not, you know, and I make a point that I'm on the floor with the roller as opposed to being on my treatment table or so forth, because anything that gives a sense of lack of safety is going to have a very primal response. And those things, and that's why I feel that, you know, I know there are some interesting ways to use the melt or the soft tissue work that they're using with these tools, but I still believe that a child does not reach for something that's uncomfortable. And if we're really trying to speak to that kind of biologic, you know, early experience where the tonus in their body is a lot less if it's a healthy situation, and they're not in a sense of threat. They're open, they're curious. And so, you know, and I wanted to keep the firmness because I just knew how much that the floor was the reflection, it was the mirror for ourselves. So the more we had the feedback of something that had direct contact, that was going to give us a certain responsiveness. And the funny part, the way the roller was actually shaped was my husband saw how disappointed I was when we got the prototypes, and I got on it because I had it all in my head as a theory, and it was horrible. And I thought, this is awful. This doesn't do it at all. And to his credit, on many levels, he brought me to the kitchen and he started shaving the roller. He got an iron and he put a piece of aluminum foil and he would iron it out and he'd go, get on it. And I go, well, that's better, but, and then he would go, okay. And he kept, and we literally spent time getting the prototype, or I kept getting on it going, I think we've got it, you know? And it was later on that I realized how much I enjoyed the rocking on it, which my wonderful favorite person in life, Ruthie Alon, came into mind, is that the soothing of rocking and feeling, where else do we know that? Rocking the baby, rocking the cradle. So to me, it was like, oh, I never put it together that would be one of the main assets to it, that it has this kind of really soothing element. So it made me go back to looking at the research and realizing I did a clerkship with, you know, those Jean Eyre's work, where it was the somatic tools of looking at children and child development and how they use the mechanisms of rocking. And I thought, well, of course, this all makes sense. And, you know, we're in a place where there's a lot of disruption for our health and well-being. And so if I can help people just kind of have that soothing moment for a way of, and I love when they tell me that, you know, they do it, they're able to kind of check in with themselves. And, you know, so to me, that's the bonus. It's such a great feeling.
Very nice. So I'm really convinced that you are looking for tools, for ways to bring another quality in life of people. Yeah. And I thought, oh, maybe that could be the end of the podcast, because it was so clear and obvious that you really looking for ways, and then you find out something, then you check it with the research we have or ideas from other people. So it's very interconnected and on the way. But I want to ask you, is there something you want to talk about? And I didn't ask you until now about it now.
Wow, you've given me so much latitude. You know, I just want to put a really nice sense of gratitude to you. I think in a world that tends to get competitive sometimes, we're not always lifted up by, the people that could lift us up. And you're doing a huge, generous thing for Feldenkrais practitioners to give them the forum to be able to talk about the passion of this work. And if there's anything I would love to present is that I'm gonna get choked up. I'm more in love with this work over the years. It has only grown. So if you're new to the industry, I want to send welcome arms to you, because you'll never look back. And I hope that this gives more of a value to the work, so people will seek you out, so that you won't struggle to try and use it as a career, because it's been the best career path I could ever imagine. And I just think it, I'm very, very grateful. It's a, they call it, it's not work if you enjoy going to do it all the time. So it's a passion of mine. So that's mostly what I'd like to say, is that I really would like to lift up others like you just did with me, and with everybody else that's out there that's trying to do this work.
Yes, let us work together to have more Feldenkrais in the world, and I think it will be a better place if there are more people are doing more Feldenkrais. It's really my inner thinking of it. And if there's something hearing this and thinking, oh, I also want to be a guest in this podcast, and I want to talk with Christina and also in this way to the world and the Feldenkrais world, I'm very happy to have your email in my post box, and we can talk about it as we both found each other. I was so happy you wrote me, and we had this wonderful talk, and every time I understand my work better, and I'm so happy to hear so good words and how you explained it to me again. I'm really, yes, Feldenkrais is something we do as a passion, and sometimes I think the people feel good in their lives, and that's so good, but sometimes they don't know that there is maybe something more they can experience, or reach out for something, another quality for them. And that's something I'm thinking about. It's good to be happy how you are at the moment, but there can be another world. And I think Feldenkrais is a good thing to do, to find new ways and new doors to open in the life. That's
absolutely. Perfectly said.
Very nice, because I think normally I ask the other people for the end word, but this time I had the idea it came out of myself, that I say, okay, that has to be said at the moment for me to the outside. So thank you, Stacy. Really was my pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely mine. Thank you so much.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.